All right, guys, as promised, we are talking about observations. So, as I mentioned last week's video, that I wanted to take some time out, do a different video, just apart from everything. So, when you guys have the opportunity to watch this, you will be able to know how to fill out the observations, what things are needed for the observations, and basically how they're going to look like. So, this being stated, your observations can be found in your syllabus calendar button. If you go back, let me see if I can toggle between here. You'll get a million. There we go. In the syllabus calendar button, you'll find a little thing. Here you'll find obviously your syllabus and your calendar, but you'll also find your observation forms and school policies. But let's go back to the observation form because I want to talk about this. So you download it and you get this Excel program, this file. So let me enable the editing here. So there's a front and there's a back. Front, back, front, back. Both sides have to be filled out. So here's more or less what you got to do. So when you go and you observe a teacher, you have to tell me how much. You have to, all right, let me back up a second. When you observe a teacher, you have to observe a lesson. And you have to tell me about that lesson, what things you observed in it, and how long you observed it, which school you observed it at, and whatnot. So, it is important to understand that a lesson is more than just a teacher talking. A lesson incorporates all the other stuff that goes with it as well as that. So if the teacher talks for 20 minutes and then goes to his kidney table to read with the students, let's say 5 students, while the other students are doing either working at their desk or doing, let's say, workshops or workstations, all that is still considered part of the lesson because a lesson is a block of time, not just the time the teacher's talking. So when the teacher's talking, that's called direct instruction. So that's just part of the lesson, but it's not the whole lesson. So these lessons are blocks that can last hours, right? I know when I worked in elementary school, a ELA or SLA, because I was doing bilingual, which was Spanish language arts or English language arts. That was reading, writing, centers, independent work, working with students, reading with students. All these things was a block of about 180 minutes. So, 180 minutes is a pretty long block. That's like a 3-hour block there. So, that is what you're going to be observing. So what you're going to do is that you're going to say, okay, I observed, let's say, Ms. Gonzalez. So I type over here, Ms. Gonzalez, for doing, I can't spell today, Ms. Gonzalez teaching math, right, for 4th grade math for, let's say, 120 minutes, which would be 2 hours. I'm going to put here 2 hours. Very important that you tell me the time that you observed. Because when you guys turn these in, the way I figure out that you have all 16 hours of observations is that I actually go to every single one of these and count the time. If that time does not add up to 16 hours, I cannot give you credit for the observations. And what's terrible about this is that the state of Texas needs these 16 hours. So what ends up happening, I've had students that give me half of the time or don't do these thinking, well, I got an A, this is only 20% of my grade. But I cannot, let me repeat, I cannot pass you. You cannot pass this course. You cannot receive credit if you don't do the 16 hours of observations. And so it's very important. Like the most important part of the observations is you fill out this time box, right? And of course, you want to put the school and I'm just making. I'm putting my school for when I went to elementary school, Longfellow Elementary. I went to Ottawa County. Ottawa County. And you can put the day and whatnot and fill it out. So over here is where you fill out the rest of this. You are filling out the rest of this part as you see it. So like you could say, did the teacher do a roll? Did they do roll time? If you saw it, yes, tell me about it. What announcements and how long did it take? So this may be like 5 minutes. Took roll. I can't spell today. And so on and so forth, right? Or if you got there and they didn't take roll, but just NA, right? So just depends. Did they do any collecting notes and collecting paperwork? Write that down. Just fill it out. Tell me the topic of the lesson. If it is algebra, okay, let me think. 2-digit by 1-digit addition. Write that down and tell me what objectives they learned that day. If you happen to have a TEKS, put it down. If you don't have a TEKS, don't worry about it. If they talk about the previous lesson, you can write that down, what they did. If they didn't, so if they did, let's say teacher mentions last lesson being 1-digit by 1-digit addition, right? You write that down. What if they didn't mention that? Well, then you would go over here and put NA. Okay? NA just means that it's not applicable, right? So if you didn't see any of these things observed, you can put that down. How did they introduce the topic? What kind of hook did they use? So in other words, if it were me introducing this, maybe I would introduce the topic by reading a book. Read a math book. And whatever. May have discussed or whatever concept they used. If they did nothing, you can put NA. Do they have enthusiasm and knowledge of the subject? Here's where you get to critique the teacher a little bit. Fill that out. Say, teacher was dull. Teacher was boring and monotone. Right? You can, whatever you think of it. Or did they have knowledge? Or teacher had great knowledge of the subject, showed much enthusiasm, blah, blah, blah. Was there eye contact, movement around the room? Did they have with itness? Was there voice inflection? The voice inflection, like, did they excite you? Were they monotone? That's where you fill that part out. What techniques did they use to stay on task? So did they use good questioning? Were they modeling praise? Were they critical, corrective? Just basically with all these, you're just going to answer these as they are, right? If you don't see it, let's say I never saw the teacher correct a student, right? Then NA, right? What techniques? You can say eye contact is a technique. Another technique for staying on task is proximity, and so on and so forth, right? The stuff that they did, right? Or if they didn't, this is a great time to critique the teacher and say, hey, we didn't see this, whatnot. Classroom discipline, what did they use? Tell me specifically what kind of discipline system, management system they have. How did they wrap up the concept? How did they show that the evidence of planning the lesson, did it look like they just made it up out of the thin air? Were they struggling through it, or did they plan it? How could you tell this? And in what ways was success measured? Was it through homework, quiz, a project? This is like the work that they turned in, right? And then down here, any comments that you have about that teacher. You do not have to show this to the teacher in the classroom, so it doesn't matter. You could say, you could be negative. You could say the teacher was not a good teacher. You can tell that the teacher's a first-year teacher, or you could say you could tell this teacher's a master teacher because they did this, this, and this, the engagement. But fill those things out. Like I said, if there's an area where you absolutely don't see anything, you can put NA there. But make 110% sure that you give me the time and, you fill out as much as you can, okay? Now, the back of the sheet, you just go here and you toggle back. This is kind of easy because this is just, again, you fill out this top part, but this is just checks. Now, I always like to use X's. You can use an X, you can use a check, you can do however you want. And you check off or X off the areas that were that you saw these things happening, right? Let's say the teacher was funny. You're like, oh my gosh, that's the funniest teacher I've ever seen. You check that off. And you just continue doing all that. That's it with that. So this is how you fill out the observation sheet. Make sure that you fill one out for every lesson. Now, the lesson, again, could be a 3-hour lesson, could be a 20-minute lesson, or if you're going to high school, or if the classes switch out, let's say you're in a class. The teacher teaches 9th grade math, and it's the same exact lesson all day long, right? What should I do? Should I fill this out for every time they switch students? No. You can go ahead and just put, you know what, I was in the classroom for 6 hours, the whole day. That's how much time I saw the lesson for, right? But let's say you have little ones and they're switching lessons more often. Maybe they only do science for 35 minutes. Well, then you give me 35 minutes as their lesson time. So it really depends. Some of you guys will be turning in 3 or 4 of these because you were in high school, or you saw like a 4th grade teacher that does nothing but math, right? And some of you guys will be turning in 20 of these because you saw a kindergarten teacher that changed lessons a lot during the day, right? So there's that. If you have any questions on this, don't hesitate to ask. Now, the next thing I want to show you guys is that you're going to turn these in where the observations are due. But this is not going to be turned in until the end of the semester, so don't worry about it. But you'll find a little finish observation upload. You can turn these in the following formats. Excel, right? You can just fill it in like I did. You can print them out, and most of my students do this. They print them out, they fill it in by hand, and then they take a picture of it, a JPEG. You can do that. You can scan it, send me a PDF. That's fine as well. You can change it into a Word document and manipulate it like that. Those are the basic ways I could take it in when you turn it in. And when you turn them in, you got to turn them in all at the very same time, right? So you can't turn in one and then try to turn in another a day later. You got to turn them all at the same time, because if not, it won't let you. So when you turn these bad boys in, I need it in a JPEG or Excel or PDF or Word document. If you send me Pages format, I can't take that, because Pages is a format that doesn't work on Blackboard. Blackboard is again, doesn't have Apple on it, right? Products. Or if you do Google Docs, again, I can't take that because it won't even let me open it up. So make sure you save it as a Microsoft doc. Though Google Docs does let you save it as a Microsoft or PDF or other formats. So that's that's pretty cool about that. Let's see, what else do I want to say about the observations? The observations. Make sure you call the school district to be able to get permission to go, because they need to do a background check, and that could take up to 3 weeks for them to do a background check. So make sure you call the school district and say, hey, I want to go observe your classes, and they'll let you. Some school districts will ask you for a permission letter from me. If they do, I will send it to you. Just ask me, say, Jorge, the Galena Park is asking for a permission letter. Can you send that to me? And I shall send it to you. No issues there. Make sure you do this. Now, you have the option of doing all of 16 hours in person. Of course, with the pandemic, things ebb and flow. If schools start closing down to people outsiders, you have the option to do 8 hours of the 16 hours online. What that means is that you can do all of these in person, or basically half the hours in person and half the hours online if you want to. Or you can do like 12 hours in person and 6 hours online. But you do have to do 8 hours, at least 8 hours in person. Now, that being said, how do I do the online ones? Well, guess what? If I'm deciding to do the online ones, I just go over here where it says the observation options, and you download the options. Hold on, it'll take it a second here to download. But you download the options in the Word format. One of them's Word and the other was a PDF. And you click on these, and then you can start watching the videos, and you have to document them. The only sucky thing about this is that you have to document every single lesson by itself. So you have to fill out a observation sheet for each lesson. And some lessons are an hour long. Those are the ones that are great. But some lessons are only like 20 minutes long. So sometimes if you do it like this, you end up filling up a lot more lesson observation forms than you would the other way if you just do them all in person. But you can do that. You could do up to 8 hours like that. Make sure you save those. And again, even when you see somebody in person, make sure you make an observation form. You fill out an observation form for every single time you change lessons. You cannot have an observation form for more than 8 hours. 8 hours being the maximum. If you go home and you go back to school, and the next day the teacher that you go see is still teaching that particular subject and that particular thing, you have to fill out a new observation form, because they are it just kind of ends with the day. The other thing I wanted to mention is that make sure that when you go observe, you observe a public school teacher, and that private schools, because we don't know if they're certified or not. It's kind of a sticky area, but so we prefer that you go out and see public school teachers, because they have to be certified. All right. So I think that's everything. If you have any questions concerning this, don't hesitate to reach out to me. All right. Well, have a great day, and I'll be seeing you in a little bit. Bye.